All right, hi everyone. Thank you for coming to the Tom Green County Democratic page. I'm here with Lieutenant Mike Hernandez, who is currently running for police chief in San Angelo. So thank you for coming to speak with us.
Thank you.
And do you want to go ahead and give yourself an introduction and a bit of your background?
Okay. Lieutenant Mike Hernandez. I've been with the department 33 and a half years. I'm currently the division commander over the Criminal Investigation Division.
Oh, that's a big unit.
Yes, sir. I also oversee our CSI and evidence. And then I'm our department's critical incident commander if a critical incident should arise.
Okay. What would a critical incident be?
So, for instance, here about a month ago, we had a barricaded subject up just there within the ASU area.
Yeah.
And, when they're barricaded and have the potential for violence and have a weapon, then the incident commander makes a decision on whether or not the SWAT and negotiators teams come out and went to evaluate it. It warranted it, and so we responded, and it was I keep saying that from the time I left home and got back, it was about 5.5 hours. So
wow, that's
maybe about
long day.
4.5 hours standoff, but it came to a successful conclusion. Nobody hurt, suspect in custody, and that's what your responsibilities are as critical incident command.
Some heavy stuff.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, anything else you want to mention about your background?
I was in the Marine Corps. I'm very proud of my time. I've worked in the gang unit, special operations, narcotics, SWAT for 20 years. I was a team leader for 10 of that 20.
Wow.
And I've had quite a career. I was fortunate enough to attend the FBI National Academy in 2014.
Is that the one up in Quantico? Or?
Yes, sir.
Very nice.
And 1%ers from around the world of command staff level folks are invited, and there was 47 states, 27 countries represented. It was session 256. I met a lot of very respected leaders in the law enforcement field, and I was very, like I said, fortunate to attend.
All right, very cool. Well, then I'll go ahead and jump into some questions.
Yes, sir.
So my first question would be then, since you're obviously running for police chief, there's some things you would probably want to change. What do you consider to be the biggest hurdles to the police department right now that you would want to fix? Okay,
so if you go to my website, mikeforchief.com, it's spelled out there. I want to instill or bring back pride to the police department, to the uniform, to the what we're called to do. So my four areas of wanting to see that turnaround, if you will, are improved discipline, better training, which leads to more successful recruitment and retention.
Okay.
And so those are my four areas. Not that I don't have more as far as working with the city government and a liaison, if you will, between the citizens and the police department of give and take between us.
So more like increasing the communication and the outreach and stuff?
I would be very open to communication to a certain extent.
Right.
I went to the FBI National Academy specifically for public information.
Okay.
And in reference to that, when it comes down to a case, we don't want to take the case. And so there's certain things like I've used this as an example. If I leave here and I'm, let's just say, heading to the police department to do my daily duties, and I'm involved in a crash, usually people today want to know who was in the crash,
right.
What were the circumstances, what were,
what
the
led
above.
to it.
And we don't need to release that until my wife or my family is contacted. And so when we say that it's still under investigation, when we're dealing with the media, we just ask them to be responsible in their reporting about that, and which we have a very good relationship with all the media. They usually do when we ask them not to report something. Obviously, we don't report suicides, and so things of that nature. So.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yes, sir.
Alrighty. So you mentioned, officer hiring and retention. I know a big topic during this whole election has been officer shortages and even trying to maintain who we already have from potentially jumping to another police department that may pay more or have different benefits or something. So how would you approach trying to not only get more officers, but retain the people that we currently have?
Sure. We're 16 short right now,
Ah.
and we only have 3 officers in our academy currently. We'll lose more officers in that year than we can replace.
Is that just due to leaving, retirement, or a combination there?
Yes, all the above. And it takes a while to train up an officer. It takes a lot of money, a lot of time and effort on behalf of all the instructors that assist the academy staff. I happen to be one of those instructors.
Okay.
But we are a stepping stone, and what we need to change is the wanting them, for them to want to stay here, to want to work here. And all I ask, and that when I talked about being a liaison between the government, the city, you know, the citizens and the police department, is to, you know, get everyone to give and take, if you will, to keep us within our sister cities of about 85 to 90% of the, whatever the going rate is.
Okay, so we want to 90 to 95% of, say, the pay of, you know, Midland, Odessa, Abilene, areas
Sure,
around us.
and we're not asking for max, because I believe they'd rather stay here and work here. You know, we have what I like to think of as a bubble out here in West Texas, this Tom Green County. We just don't have, you know, the things that are going on in the big city with defunding police. I don't know that I'd still be working in this field if I was a law enforcement in a big city. It's just a lot to, you know, put up with, especially when you're out there serving and doing the best that you can. You know, nobody's perfect. I always talk about I'm a defer the expert kind of guy. You know, I've been doing it for a while, so I believe I'm an expert in this area. And so, yeah, it's just a lot to consider when you're trying to keep these officers here, and you want to lead by example. You want them to want to work for you. And so
Right.
I've been using a Mark Ziegler quote. I always had it on my baseball cards in the early 90s, but just half of it. I had the half that he started with, you don't demand respect, you earn it.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't until recently that I learned there was a second sentence to that, and it was, you don't expect loyalty, build it.
Yeah.
And that's what I hope to do.
Everything's got to be built up from the ground up.
Yes, sir.
Alrighty. Then you mentioned training as well. So what would be your approach to training, and especially like officers knowing the law that they're applying? Because I know in recent years we've had some issues with some officers off duty have been caught DWI, and we also had that incident where the man was arrested at Walmart a couple years ago, and that started a whole viral thing online and a lawsuit. And so how do you try to approach avoiding those issues in the future and ensuring that your officers are properly trained?
So obviously, if you read between the lines in my what are the changes? What do I want to tackle, if you will? And I started with improved discipline.
Okay.
You know, being a Marine, I too, again, back to this calling of wearing this uniform, this honorable position.
A call of service to your country.
Some officers don't agree with that we're held to a higher standard. Well, when you're wanting to enforce the law, if you're not following the law, I don't know how you can enforce the law.
Yeah.
And so with that being said, it just depends on where that crime or the violation was committed, that we want to just make it sure that it's the standard across the board, that it meets the criteria, and that we don't go overboard of trying to discipline an officer more than he's supposed to be. And for instance, you brought up DWI. DWIs across the board, first offense is usually probation. I believe they should have a second chance, because we're in this field of having to deal with this same 5% over and over, and the job is tough. And we don't even know what officers are going through sometimes with PTSD issues.
When you say the same 5%, do you mean the same 5% of officers that are offending? Or what,
Oh, no. When they're dealing with the folks out there on the street, the bad guys, right? They get jaded with having to deal with the same, you know, the routine of somebody, you know, the assaults, the public intoxication, the DWIs, and it never ceases. And so they need a break, if you will. And so, you know, depending on the shifts that they work, some of them have 3 days off, some have 2 days off, some have 4 days off every other weekend if you're on patrol on a 12-hour. And so I believe they should have a second chance.
Okay.
But with that being said, there's consequences, of course. And we're not, I don't think we should be sharing the officer's business outside the job, but if we decide on a 30-day suspension and the officer signs off on it, then we should be good. Like the folks should trust that we're taking care of business, and that if there is a second offense in the same situation, say a second DWI, well, then I believe that it warrants firing, if you will. And so those are some of the things that I looked at in reference to improved discipline. And then with the training, like I said, I've done the FBI National Academy Leadership course. I've gone to the state with the DPS with different schools to COG here when they bring someone in to teach.
What is a COG?
COG is the Council of Governments.
Okay.
And so that is free to us depending on the class because we're with the city government. And so when they bring high caliber instructors in, we should be taking advantage of that. And we should be requiring our supervisors to send their troops. Now, I know it's tough to try to fill your gaps on the street, say on patrol, to make sure that all the districts are covered and such.
Especially with the shortages going on.
Sure,
And everything.
and it's a balancing. But perhaps we should be looking at overtime for those when we need it, and or other, which being over the Criminal Investigation Division, if during inclement weather or there's just no more officers on the street. The detectives are required to put on a vest and go respond to calls.
Do you pull even from other departments that normally wouldn't do that?
For sure. And so, out at training, they need assistance all the time. So if they're at the gun range doing firearms qualifications, well, there's nobody back at the training center to teach. And so they have to pull from the department. And so I teach stress management.
Okay.
I've been doing it a while. I believe that I still have my hair. Yes, it's getting gray, but I've been doing it for a while that I might know something about stress and
You
how
have
to deal
good
with it.
techniques that you could put in place over the entire department to help
Yes,
with
sir.
it.
Yes,
All
sir.
right. Very cool. You already talked on discipline. Cool. So this was a question actually from our chairman for the Democratic Party. He was curious if you're aware of the Civil Service Commission and the whole appeals process for officers that maybe do get discipline, termination, promotion, and how you would, if you would try to utilize it more, utilize it better, just how you would use it.
Sure, I would. Sometimes we shy away from court, period, as officers. I, for one, have always, I don't mind it at all. I try to put the best packet together when I made arrests. I tried to make sure and ensure that I had all the probable cause that I needed. And I think knock on wood, I presented some good cases. And there's nothing wrong with court. There's nothing wrong with an arbitrator or a civil service commission looking at what you have to offer as far as this is what I need from y'all in reference to this officer. I'm trying to discipline him so that we continue to have a department that is transparent to a point, but that is taking care of business. And, at the end of the day, if they choose not to, let's just say I want to suspend the officer for 2 weeks and they deny me and they put him back on the street without, well, I did my part.
Right.
And it's above my pay grade, if you will.
Right.
And so we'll just continue as is.
Okay.
So I will take advantage of that being there for me and I won't shy away from it.
All right. Very cool. All right. This is one I've constantly heard from is people referring to that there's a system called the good old boy system within the police department. And I mean, do you see that as actually being an issue with the department now or not? And how would you fix it? Or how, if it isn't an issue, how would you try to alleviate the fears of the public that it's in place? So.
Yeah. So I'm not one. and so I don't even know, I've been asked this before. And when that came out, I've been there for a while, so I'm a good old boy. I hope I'm a good guy. Like I've been doing it for a while, and there are guys that say, for instance, if I go into the gym, the young guys are like, "Oh, hey, LT, you still work out?" I'm like, "Wow, I still do this job." But in reference to that, we have our officers that support us in the department. So aren't those officers that are supporting each candidate your good old boys, if you will. So in reference to inside, we're all civil servants. If say the administration decides and is supporting me for chief because I'm the veteran, I've got the most experience, I've been around the longest, I do my job well. I guess they're good old boys.
I guess the main concern people have is that there's this informal, kind of like looking the other way if, say, an officer does something wrong.
Well,
and I think that's what most people think when they
I'm
say
glad
good
you
old
put
boy.
it that way. So, I arrested my brother for a bank robbery over 20 years ago.
Jeez, that must have been
I got
hard.
my dad arrested for aggravated sexual assault of a child. I'm not a good old boy.
Okay.
I've got a cousin on the run in Mexico for a dope deal through DPS, $50,000 cash and heroin turnaround, 2 Suburbans seized, and he got on a low bond and ran to Mexico. He ran because he knows that I'm not going to put up with it.
Right.
So if that's what it's all about, they stand corrected because look at my track record. I presented my evidence, if you will, my thoughts on my brother when he did that, and the FBI went with it, and he did about 20 years for that crime.
So you've had to deal
I'm
with
glad
that.
that he's doing better today, but he'd tell anybody right here, if he was sitting next to me, that I saved his life because he was on dope at the time.
Okay.
My dad actually passed in federal prison because he had been in the military. When they were looking for him, they reached out to me. Nebraska reached out to me and found out that I was a local law enforcement and said, "Can you help me out in reference to tracking him down?" And we did. So if that's what it's all about, I guess they're not talking about me.
Yeah. So you've got the personal experience where you've had to deal with it, and it's always service first, and you would try to instill that with the department, I would assume.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
And this one may not apply because you already mentioned the how other departments in bigger cities, they did the defunding and stuff after the whole Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, whatever you want to call it. Do you see an issue where there's police are less trusted here in San Angelo, even with specific minority communities or anything? And if there is, would you try to maybe reach out to them or try to rebuild trust? I'm not sure it's really an issue here, but
I don't think it is, and I've always had a great relationship with whatever entity. It doesn't matter if it was the working class, the north side, the south side, however you want to look at it. I had been around where officers were going to start to be too aggressive, in my opinion, and I stopped it. I'm not going to put up with it. You know, recently I was at a veterans breakfast, and a vet said, "Well, I don't like how you guys call yourself the thin blue line because that separates us." I said, "Sir, you're looking at it all wrong, because the thin blue line separates good from bad or evil." And so, you know, and because he was a vet, I said, because the military's the thin green line. And he just said, "Well, I never thought about it that way." So I was glad that he said that, so I could, you know.
you kind of clear some stuff up with them.
Yes, sir.
There were some misconceptions.
For sure. And so it doesn't matter. If I were to get in there, I believe my mission statement speaks volumes in reference to your question. My mission statement would be serving and protecting, because the law enforcement motto throughout the land is protect and serve. But how often do we truly protect? We're responding to protect. We're reacting, right? It's very rare that we see it on the front side and stop it. And so I want the mission statement to be serving and protecting all who call through pride, professionalism, and purpose. And so I hope that the citizens hear me loud and clear when I say all.
Okay, cool. Alrighty. And transparency has been talked a lot about this. Are you aware of the recent laws that went into effect, I believe, last year with the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement that have to do with like a centralized and standardized database for officer personnel files and misconduct that has to be reported to the state, and then even a database that would be publicly accessible of all officers in the state, and I believe their licensing status to actually practice as a peace officer. Are you aware of that? Would you try to, I know you'll have to utilize it at some point, but...
Sure, well, and we'll have to be, whatever the state, you know, whatever law is implemented, we have to follow the rules. Again, I'm not, you know, to ensure that that officer gets due process,
Right.
just like anyone else, prior to us convicting him.
Right.
They have just as much rights as anyone. We say in law enforcement all the times the bad guys have more laws to protect them than we do. But it seems like folks are ready to crucify an officer when they only see part of the situation. I've been shot at, and this was asked of me too, to have you really been shot at 11 times in your career? I've been here 33 and a half years. I told you that I'm part of the gang unit, special operations, SWAT for 20 years. I keep a tally, and my wife doesn't like it. I've never been hit.
Thank God for that.
I am thankful for that. Whenever, again, when things are put out, sometimes not the whole case is put out. And so you need to get to the very
it's not the whole thing.
end of the process of going through court and ensuring a judge or a jury are the ones that convict.
Right.
Even when a grand jury says true bill, it's not over, right? And so having been in a situation that it took 2 years for the feds to send you the civil liability release that you've been cleared of all allegations, it's hard to deal with every day and waiting for that letter to come.
And I would imagine that's something the public probably doesn't see a lot. They see the media and the victims are put on camera, but they never really see what's going on with the officer. It's not like you're just on paid vacation for like 2 years or something. So.
Sure. And we need to, again, that tainting the case. It's what I went to school for. We don't want to taint that officer, and that's why we tell the officers, stop talking, get your legal representative,
right.
and so they can guide you through some things, For instance, they would tell you something like, if you were to put in your report that I was carrying a Sig Sauer 9mm weapon, he would just advise to say it was just a weapon that was issued to you. You don't have to do details, because the more you put in, I may be saying too much as far as, defense attorneys every day are watching, what we do so
right.
that they know how to defeat us, if you will. We need to get better at it and make sure that we take care of the case until it's time to be presented.
Okay, very cool.
Yes, sir.
Alrighty. So this one, and I understand, this one's regarding Senate Bill 4, which has been in the media a lot, the new immigration law that would allow officers to arrest someone that they suspect of being in the country illegally. And I understand you don't get to choose the laws you enforce, and I know it's currently held up in the courts right now, but I have heard from some people I know personally that they're fearful that that bill goes through, that they have to carry, passports and papers just to go to Walgreens and stuff because of fear that the police are going to arrest them. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, or how you would try to alleviate the public's fears that, we're not Russia, we're not China, or whatever, and we're not going to go after them.
Correct. We would have to enforce the laws that are put in place, right? Well, right now, with being 16 officers short and our officers out there going from call to call to call, it's going to be awful hard for a San Angelo police officer to walk up somebody to have the kind of time to say, do you have your papers? We're going to deal with everything case by case. If a criminal offense takes place and we're directed that route, I believe that's where that's going to come into play. I don't think we're going to have time to go up to people and just start papering them. So yes, I'll tell you right now, we will not just go up to folks on a whim to be asking for these things. It's going to have to come with somebody, and just the state's signing off on this, and like you said, it is held up right now. But it should come through, then we'll deal with it on a case by case. But we're not going to actively be looking for those folks. We've got a job to do. We're responding to crashes. We're responding to family violence. We're responding to the schools for threats. And this never stops. It's 24/7. And these guys, when they do a 12-hour shift, they're spent, and they just want to go home and go to sleep.
Doing 12 hours.
Right? And I never did a 12 in my career. Being in charge of our detective division, I'm on 5/8s, Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. But it is somebody else's time. I've been doing it for a while. I used to work a lot of overtime, so I can say in that aspect that I did more time in just an 8 to 10 hour shift.
Okay.
But that was to try to take care of my family.
Right.
And I get it when these guys are done, but I just don't believe we're going to have the time, and nobody can again, get on us because we don't have time to be checking folks' passports or paperwork.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, then moving on from immigration into just crime in general, what do you consider are, like if you were chief, what would be your enforcement priorities? Like what do you see are the biggest crime issues in San Angelo that need to maybe get the most focus that may not be happening right now?
Okay, well, we have things in place that we deal with every other week on command staff. That's 7 lieutenants, 2 assistant chiefs, and a chief.
Okay.
We meet around the round table, and criminal analysis division gives us what the latest, greatest crime stats are.
So you're using like data driven?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I'm over that division as well, and so I'm very aware. Burglary of vehicles. There are burglary of buildings that are increasing, which we recently were able to capture with the citizens of San Angelo's help, what we call the jukebox thief of I believe 37 to 38 cases is
Jeez.
what we're going to be able to clean up. Very satisfied with our detective that took the lead on that case. But vehicle burglaries, we still to this day try to put out information for folks to lock their cars, take their weapons out of their car, their laptops, their purses, things of that nature. There was a time that the tools of the trade were a screwdriver and a flashlight. Well, they don't need to carry a flashlight anymore because they've got phones.
Yeah.
How do the bad guys know that there's a weapon in your car and that they want to crash that window if it is locked? Well, a lot of folks have Trigicon, night sights, things like that on their weapons, and they just put their flashlight through the windshield. This is from the bad guys that tell us how they do this. Right?
It's really
and so there's a
sophisticated.
weapon in there. They're going to crash the window. They have no idea. How did they know? So I highly recommend, lock your cars. If you don't have an alarm, get one. If you can light up your house at night, to make it easier. Those kinds of things we're always trying to do and communicate with the public
Right.
to help us out. But family violence is up. Why? I believe after COVID, folks struggling to get back to work and or they lost their jobs. Financial issues, medical issues, the bills, they stack up. And so we're going to continue to try and ensure that we're there for them when we need to stop an assault. We're going to try to put the officers on the street in hot spots to try to alleviate some of this. And we are successful from time to time from catching a burglar. But, again, here's that fine line between the city government and the police department where we need more troops, we need more officers, we need to pay them so we can draw them here versus them leaving here. And I believe that when we have those gaps filled, that we hold our first line supervisors, our sergeants accountable for ensuring that their troops are out there doing their job.
All right, very cool. So when it does come to an officer or a sergeant on the street and they're actually engaging with the public for law enforcement and, maybe they're dealing with a burglary or maybe a marijuana possession or something like that, how much discretion do you think an officer should have? Should it be pretty black and white what they're allowed to do, or should they have some leeway? Like I've been pulled over before, and the officer obviously has some leeway to be like, okay, you admitted what you did, I'm going to give you off with a warning or something, but they also have the right to issue me a ticket or whatever they would like. So I'm curious, what would be your approach and how much leeway and discretion would you allow your officers?
The standard for a traffic stop, you mentioned 2 of them, is a verbal warning, a verbal reduced to writing, a citation, but it can also go to an arrest if they refuse to sign, because then you're signing and you're not pleading guilty, you're staying in the contact court within 15 days, go before the judge.
Right.
And so when they don't sign, they have to call a supervisor out to give them one more opportunity, and at that point, we would have to arrest and take them before the judge if it was working hours, and or they could sit overnight to see the judge in the morning.
So there's a lot of steps up to that
Yes,
point.
and so I believe that the officers should have that discretion. There's going to be laws that are outside there. You can't have discretion. It's an arrest, period.
It's black and
in
white.
reference to family violence, we shall arrest.
Right.
A felony committed in your view, we shall arrest. Even if we're out of town on vacation. If you see a felony in your view and you're a police officer, you should be carrying your weapon and your badge, and you should take action. And so, yeah, it just depends on the situation.
Yeah.
And I would just hope that the officers would remember, and you know, I wanted to say this earlier, in reference to us dealing with the same 5%, what we lose sight of and young officers get jaded about is that we forget that the 95% of the people are behind us. And when I talk about that bubble being out here, you know, officers can go to a coffee shop or go to grab a lunch and somebody's already paid for it ahead of time. And it's just nice to see and know, and that's what those officers need to realize, that we're doing it for that 95%, and not to treat everybody like they're criminals, you know.
Right.
And it's just a thing, you know, officers sitting in a corner of a restaurant making sure they can see the front door and things of that nature.
So how would you try to approach the officers not getting jaded? You mentioned the long weekends and stuff. Would you try to do anything like maybe rotating people into different departments, or making sure that they're not always on the street dealing with that 5%? Or how would you try to approach that?
You know, one of the things that we haven't done in a while, and I get it, we're busy and short-staffed and things like that, but if there's a critical incident, we used to debrief. And we need to bring those officers in and have a talk. We need to ensure, like the first line supervisor and lieutenants of patrol division, especially because those guys are out there all the time, are talking to their troops or reaching out to their friends or their buddies to make sure, hey, is everything okay with him from that traumatic,
Make sure they get
say
that
for
support
instance,
structure.
For sure. And we do have things available through the city, like an employee assistance program. I've also, in my time, worked on several boards throughout the city, like ADACT, that I know of, you know, Eric Sanchez out there that, hey, I have a troop that needs assistance in this area. And so I have some contacts that we could reach out to try to get another level. We have chaplains at our disposal in the police department. We have a psychologist. We have things in place, and we need to take advantage of them. Perhaps even classes of how to.
Yeah, back to that training piece.
Yes, I had done a spin-off of a Citizens Police Academy years ago, and we only did one. I want to bring this back. But it was a class for the spouses of what your officer may or may not go through on a traumatic situation, say, for instance, the death of a child, or walking up on a person dying in their hands, if you will. With veteran officers, their spouses, psychologists, chaplains, people that had been there and done that, so that we could walk them through, so that they, you know, when that officer gets home and what happened tonight? Nothing. They might have a better approach, or might just listen. Sometimes that's all it takes, is just to give them an ear, or to reach out to somebody and say, hey, he's struggling, she's struggling. So yeah, I think we have things in place that we don't take advantage of.
Okay.
But we could definitely, again, bring that up. Maybe even make a class, and because TCO just requires that whatever the class is, if we have the instructor has a certification and puts his lesson plan together, they can decide on whether or not that's going to be hours to the troops. Okay. And recently, with the city trying to stop the 21-ish officers that had applications outside of our department, and about 6 leaving within a few days. They closed the gap a little bit, and it caused the withdrawal of those applications. Yeah. And so there's just things that we can do to try to alleviate some of the problems.
All right. Cool. All right. Well, that was everything I had. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about your campaign, or anything you want to say to the voters? Or?
Yeah, I appreciate everybody's support up to this time. It's been everything, a little bit of everything. It's been nerve-wracking. It's been tiring. It's been exciting at times. It's been, I'm not going to lie, hard. It's been hard to go through this process again. If you recall, I ran in 2016, and I said we need a change, and we got change. The mission was accomplished. I believe now that Chief Carter is retiring, and being supportive, that it should be different this time. And I just want to say thank you to everyone. I can't even begin to even name everyone, because I'm going to miss somebody and I don't want to offend anybody, but thank you for your support.
All right. Well, thank you, sir, for coming to talk to us. I really appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
All right.